You went to a lab and you set out to create the perfect guest to address everything that is happening right now in our politics, in our economy, and in our society. You would come up with our next guest. The stage, an American election in which the country threw in with a convicted felon because economic anxiety and the high cost of everything turned them away from the incumbent party and toward a TV businessman. A media climate in which the manosphere's influence had to be understood and respected and covered. And a new presidential administration where a wag the dog style one-man tariff palooza has almost instantly destabilized the global supply chain and economic picture. Enter Scott Galloway. New York Times has called Galloway the Howard Stern of the business world, serving up a, quote, heady cocktail of data-driven analysis that appeals to his core audience of men and gives them something they're not getting elsewhere, quote, permission to have feelings. Galloway stands alone in his ability to crack the code of the manosphere and not just understand that world, but reach through to them. His best-selling books and podcasts. He's an author, an entrepreneur, professor, and hosts many hit podcasts. From the Professor G Pod to Pivot with Kara Swisher and Raging Moderates with Fox's Jessica Tarlov. Most recently, Galloway is a hardline critic of platforming Steve Bannon, canceling an appearance on Bill Maher, who he likes very much still, canceled an appearance on his program because, as Galloway put it, he couldn't in any way normalize, associate, or legitimize Steve Bannon. It's where we start the hour with the aforementioned Scott Galloway. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks. I'm really enjoying the show so far, Nicole.
What do you make of this moment that we're in, where we come on the air? We've been covering the economy, not necessarily because I know a ton about it, but I know that as a political issue, there was nothing more salient. And Donald Trump, for all the promises to break to the whole country, but especially his voters, to break his promises around the economy feels pretty seismic, not just politically, but in terms of something that affects just about everybody. What are your thoughts about where we find ourselves?
I think we're essentially become a kleptocracy that would make Putin blush. I mean, keep in mind, in the 3 months since the inauguration, the Trump family has become $3 billion wealthier. So that's $1 billion a month. And to be fair, it's been a slow creep of corruption. There's been special interest groups since Citizens United that have just gone crazy. You have American citizens paying 8 times the price for Humira and Ozempic that other countries pay, even though many of these drugs we've invented here, manufacture and distribute. So there's been a weaponization of government for a while, and there are even many Congress people, including Speaker Emerita Pelosi, who've engaged in insider trading. But this is on a whole new scale. The Democrats and other Republicans have been engaging in corruption for tens or hundreds of thousands. This is now corruption for billions. And while you could argue that American business has been for sale, if you will, or America's been for sale, now the whole world's for sale. I think the Trump coin represents a new level of grift, the likes of which we haven't seen. Essentially, the president has opened a Swiss banking account that anybody can put money into, communicate why they are putting money into it to the president, and then the president can take actions, and we don't know whatever happened. And I believe it's probably already happened. And the question I would put forward is, if you're Vladimir Putin and you're spending $500 million a day on a failed war in Ukraine, wouldn't you be stupid not to somehow communicate to the president that you're willing to make him the wealthiest man in the world in exchange for maybe stopping arms shipments or intelligence to Ukraine? I think, people say, well, that's a conspiracy theory. I would argue that's just basic logic. I think Putin would be stupid not to do that right now. And I think potentially that or smaller instances of that are happening all over the world right now. And the problem is we don't even know about it. I think this level of corruption is like an iceberg. I think the majority of it is taking place below the surface. So we're in a full kleptocracy at this moment.
How did we get here?
I think so if you go back, I think it's important to ask, how did an insurrectionist get elected? And this election, Nicole, was supposed to be a referendum on women's rights. And if you look at the polling data, women's rights did not show up. What showed up was something that at least the Democratic Party had totally ignored, and that is the plight of young men. And I realize I sound like a broken record here, but I have some data. If you look at the 3 groups that pivoted hardest from blue to red from 2020 to 2024. It was Latinos who don't want to be identified as a group. Two, it was people under the age of 40 who, for the first time in our nation's history, aren't doing as well as their parents were at 40, specifically young men who feel as if, I wouldn't say are moving to the Republican Party, but feel like the Democratic Party has moved away from them. And then women ages 45 to 64. And my thesis is that's their mothers. Because when your son is in the basement vaping and playing video games, you really don't care about territorial sovereignty in Ukraine or transgender rights. You just know your son isn't doing well. And there's still a lot of women in America that will vote based on what they think is best for their sons and their husbands. And I believe you were at the Democratic National Convention. I was. And what I saw was a parade of special interest groups that mentioned all the very real struggles different special interest groups still face in America. But there wasn't one mention of the special interest group that has fallen fastest in the last 30 years, and that's young men in America, who I believe are paying the price for the unfair advantage that men of my generation received. 4 times more likely to kill themselves, 3 times more likely to be addicted, 12 times as likely to be incarcerated. If you go to the DNC website, it explicitly says who we serve. And it lists 16 demographic groups, ranging from Asian Pacific Islanders to Black Americans to the disabled to veterans. I added it up. It's 74% of the population. But when the Democratic Party explicitly says it's advantaging 74% of the population, it's not advantaging them. It's disadvantaging the other 26%. And Trump, to his credit and his campaign's credit, flew right into the manosphere. Joe Rogan, podcasts, crypto, rockets. And he overwhelmingly won a group of voters who typically had either been split or went more towards Democrats. So in sum, I think this is America, and to a certain extent the West, gagging on a notion that young men are doing really poorly and that they just want chaos. If your son isn't doing well, all you want is a change candidate. And the vice president did not represent change. I actually think struggling young men and a lack of empathy for them is the reason that we were willing to elect an insurrectionist.
Well, an insurrectionist who just did more to emasculate men than anyone in history. They will now have less buying power. They will now have a harder time picking up the tab or doing any of the things that traditionally, either as a provider, and I know you're right and talk a lot about that, being a provider and a protector is often associated with being able to pay for things. I mean, Donald Trump just made everything that we buy more expensive, and being a small business owner more out of reach and more difficult by making it harder to bring things in. How do you communicate the reality? I mean, and I agree with you. I mean, we threw in with a felon because things were too expensive, and now everything's about to get even more expensive. How do you solve for that?
It's the correct question. I want to agree. I think the Republican Party has probably been the best marketers in the world. It's not easy for a party that largely represents the interests of the top 1% to convince the bottom 99 that they represent their interests. And if you look at the cuts being made to the government, they disproportionately affect red states. So the ability to be elected by a populace who will disproportionately register the downside of these policies is an incredible marketing trick. And you're absolutely right. Everything is about to get probably more expensive for everyday consumers. A tariff increases the price of goods coming in. 88% of toys come from China. If it's a 145% tariff, 90% of households are budget constrained. That means literally a third or half as many toys under the Christmas tree. And then the market for our products overseas declines because there will be reciprocal tariffs. These countries aren't, every country that's been levied with a tariff has responded with reciprocal tariffs. So our market for our products goes down. So what do you have? You have an economy that shrinks. In addition, what's even probably more damaging is that the American economy and stock market trades at a PE multiple of 26, meaning for every dollar of profits our amazing companies produce, we get $26 in wealth coming into the shareholders of those American companies. And the reason for that is a variety of things, ranging from the fact that America is more risk aggressive, we have more risk capital, we have great universities, we have incredible technology, but also we have consistency and we have rule of law. And those two things in just 100 days have been thrown out the window. And as a result, you're seeing essentially the flows of capital, both human and financial, into the U.S. that have benefited us tremendously in terms of low interest rates, and again, greater reward for that same dollar of earnings. Those rivers have reverse flows, and for the first time in 30 years, we have the greatest inflow of capital into European index funds, and interest in investing in America from institutional investors is at a 40-year low, meaning the cost of our debt or to borrow money abroad and the value and the wealth created by our companies will decline. So not only are things going to get more expensive, but our wealth is decreasing at a pretty decent clip. We get $26 of wealth for every dollar in earnings. Japan gets 18, Germany 22, China 14. I think you're about to see those things reverse. What does that mean? If your company's doing really well, it could double its earnings in the next 4 or 5 years. But if we experience that type of multiple contraction, the stock price and the long-term wealth of a lot of consumers and households that are directly or indirectly dependent upon the stock market will see their wealth be stagnant or go down. This is kind of the worst of all worlds, an increase in the price of products and, generally speaking, the wealth and prosperity declining of American households.